Today in my strength and conditioning class, I mentioned that next Monday is our midterms, and the student in the front row kind of gasped, and I looked at her, and it turns out she's a rower on the collegiate team here, and they have a rowing test on Monday as well, a 20-minute test. And so, she was already starting to talk about the stress of having to do the 20-minute time test, as well as a midterm for a class. So my initial reaction was, wow, that's poor planning on the coach's part to do testing, performance testing during midterm week, because we know that typically because of midterms, players will be stressed, typically sleep deprivation, and other lifestyle factors that will contribute to poorer performance on a test. So we know that lack of sleep and increased stress will also lead to increased perceptions of exertion or effort. So doing that 20-minute test with less sleep and with the stress of an upcoming midterm, they're going to feel tired or feel fatigued quicker than if they were completely fresh or had slept well or didn't have the stress of an upcoming midterm to worry about. So in that sense, I immediately thought, well, that's kind of unfair to be doing your performance testing when they're going to be in this stress state, sleep deprived state where it's going to feel like more effort. But then I kind of stepped back and I was like, well, maybe this coach has a purpose. Maybe he's doing it intentionally. Maybe he's using this testing not necessarily as a performance test to measure their, let's say improvement over the last month and a half of practice, but maybe he's using it to practice testing. So to practice, because there's not a lot of races, there's only a couple fall regattas, so there's not a lot of time to kind of develop the kind of, mental toughness for a race or to prepare for the stress of racing competitions. So maybe this is kind of, his way of inducing some stress in the environment and getting them to overcome that stress. So rather than using it as a test to really measure their performance or measure their improvement over the last 6 weeks, maybe it's simply preparation and preparation for competitions that are upcoming late in the fall. And in that sense, he has them in a stressed environment because of midterms. They're going to feel more fatigued. They're going to be sleep deprived. And how can they perform in this environment? And what can that tell you, about their physical and mental resiliency? There's been a couple papers and articles, even picked up in Sports Illustrated, I believe this week, talking about the brain's role in managing fatigue and things of that nature. And so if you can do a test in this state where they are fatigued and they're stressed and sleep deprived, you can inoculate them for future pressures potentially, so that next time when they do a similar test or when they're in a racing situation, they will feel fresher. That perception of effort will be less, and so then they can push themselves further and ultimately perform better. So who knows? I haven't talked to the coach, so I don't know his methodology. Again, if we're looking at it from a performance standpoint, it's probably not an appropriate time to be testing an athlete because midterms are going to be the more stressful environment. Sleep deprivation, injuries tend to increase during periods of finals and midterms. But if it's an attempt to use that testing to prepare for competition, it could be an appropriate use of utilizing the stressors from the athlete's life to prepare them for competition later, so that they're used to going into and being in a stressful state when they're going into a competition, so that they can learn to manage the stress, find ways to calm themselves, focus on the activity, and so the next time they do such a test, the perception of effort will be less because they potentially will have some of this stress from the midterms removed, potentially being sleeping better, so on and so forth. So again, I, like most people, will tend to jump to quick conclusions when we hear something, and I think there's often two sides of it. And I think as long as a coach is doing something for the right reason or for a reason that makes sense, I think this could be a valuable experience for the rowers to really overcome the stress and to prepare for future competitions. But again, if it's just a performance measure, then it's probably not a good time because of all the psychological stress that the players will be under because of midterms.